Hi, I'm Wes Allen with DM Tales, and I'm back from my break with my newest review. This is my look at issue 2 of Carcass Crawler, the official zine of Old School Essentials. Let's roll it. Now, I'm not going to do a deep dive into the entirety of what's in issue 2 of Carcass Crawler because there is just an incredible amount of material in this little booklet. I'm going to look at two things really closely and then just kind of skim over the others. Do want to take a look at the normal design. It is a zine format, digest, saddle stitched. It is, 32 pages. The cover is a lighter cardboard than issue 1, so it's a little more flimsy. But still very nice to hold in the hand. And the paper, as is also with issue 1, glossy instead of the flat paper that the Old School Essentials print books use. So a little bit of a difference there. Now, a zine format is like any other zine format. It's 32 pages, it is saddle stitched, and it's a magazine, basically. So what sets Carcass Crawler apart from every other zine that's out there? That's when we look inside. Now, it should come as no surprise, but the layout for Carcass Crawler continues with Old School Essentials' awesome design for interior layout. It is phenomenal. Race classes are on a 2-page spread with a ton of information put inside that 2-page spread without feeling cluttered, including things like your experience table, saving throws, and the spells that one of the classes gets for its level progression. The fact that they can fit it in this small of an area without it feeling like it's too much. Again, I've said this about Old School Essentials in just about every video I've covered with them. It's phenomenal, and I really wish other publishers would pick up this level of commitment to having an incredible design. When races are split from class, which is possible in the Old School Advanced Fantasy, their layouts appear as 1-page spreads back to back with one another. And again, the information is there and it's easy to read, pick up, and just run with it as soon as you're trying to play. I did say that there's a nice array of content in this issue. There are 2 new races which are presented, first as race classes and then again as independent races from their classes. And the first is the Phase Elf. This is actually built off the OD&D concept that an elf could actually choose to play as a magic user or a fighter, adventure to adventure. Here in this, Phase Elves have 2 personas. They have the fighter persona and the magic user persona. And these 2 personas do not have to share alignment or even goals. They can have completely different desires, which would throw the party into great disarray. Their eye colors change depending on what phase they're in. They don't have an iris or a pupil, so they're a little bit freaky. And when they're a magic user, their eyes are black, and when they are a fighter, their eyes are white. Unlike OD&D, where an elf could change based on adventure to adventure, here in Old School Essentials, the Phase Elf is able to change day by day. And this is really kind of cool because players in a party will not know who's waking up in the morning. I love this concept. Now, the Phase Elf can be played as a split race class for Advanced Fantasy, and a Phase Elf who's playing as a split race class can actually take completely new classes. They can actually pick from a list of 8. Each class has its own XP tracked, and you level up in that class when you get enough experience points. So you're not trying to just do it all at once the way you do with that typical elf race class who is a fighter magic user or a fighter cleric. Their combat bonuses, or THAC0, depending on how you're playing with armor class in the game, they're calculated by the current phase of the character. So if the character is playing as a magic user phase, then that's what they do. If they're playing as a thief phase, that's what they use. They decide they're going to be a paladin or a fighter, suddenly they're using those attack bonuses. You're almost playing 2 completely different characters with classes of your choosing. And that's something when I first encountered the Phase Elf, I wasn't all that interested in, but the more I look at it, the more I'm thinking, wow, you can really try 2 different aspects of playing the game at the same time. And now that's really intriguing to me. It's an interesting take on dual classing and really fascinating. And I want to see this in action sometime because it seems pretty cool. And then you have the Wood Elf, which is the old trope of the elves living out in the woods. The race class is much like the elf race class in classic fantasy, except they cast divine magic instead of arcane magic. So that's a nice little twist on it. In addition to the bonuses that all elves get, they also get forage and hunting bonuses. They can hide in forests, including a 90% chance to hide in a forest environment at first level, which is almost overpowered. And they get a missile attack bonus of +1, so they kind of get that halfling missile attack bonus. That's really nice. I really think that the combination of divine magic with the elf race class abilities is rather profound. It changes the way you're going to play that character, and in some respects it makes much more sense for a wood elf to do that instead of arcane magic. They live in nature after all, so it's almost druidic in their concept. But you're going to pay for it, because a wood elf race class only gets to second level at 3,000 experience points, because you are a very powerful being. Really, the last section of note is dealing with energy weapons, and I'm so excited about this because rumor mill has had it, and I do believe it's been confirmed that Necrotic Gnome, who publishes Old School Essentials, is coming out with a post-apocalyptic role-playing game, which will need energy weapons. The energy weapon spread in Carcass Crawler Issue 2 is 4 pages. The first 2-up spread deals with both missile and melee weapons, and it gives guidance on who can use them inside the game, because different classes have restrictions on the weapons they can use. It has a nice table for what energy weapons might be found in a treasure hoard, and it explains a simple mechanic on how to figure out how to use these things. So if you're familiar with Old School Gamma World, there was a little mini game table, like a flowchart that you would roll and go through, and Old School Essentials just jettisons that idea, and it's much more streamlined to get through. I really like those old tables because it gave you a little bit of tension as you were rolling through them, but in practice, it takes a long time to get through, and this is a much more simple way of doing it. The second 2-up spread gives each item's value and weight. It describes the power cells that they use and the combat stats for each. It should be noted that the energy weapons that are depicted here in Carcass Crawler are not ultra powerful, the way that energy weapons are really powerful in first edition Gamma World, doing, 40 damage to something, which is why characters needed to have so many hit points if you're familiar with that game. They work very well inside the power levels for Old School Essentials, so you can throw them in without really fearing that you're going to blow up your game. Now, aside from the classes and these cool energy weapons, I'm really looking forward to seeing what Old School Essentials does with this. There is a lot more in this issue of Carcass Crawler, including a 12-numbered encounter mini dungeon with kind of a pulpy old Egyptian feel to it, but they also add in 8 new creatures to throw at your party. And it's a nicely designed, compact adventure. You could probably do it as a one-shot or maybe 2 sessions, and it's for levels 3 through 5. So for a beginning GM or a beginning table that has gotten through the initial humps of being an adventurer, and they're looking for something that's maybe a little bit more challenging, but the GM hasn't come up with stuff yet, this is really good to throw at them. I love this inclusion in this issue. This is something I may use with my party, so I'm not showing any of it on this video. Just take my word for it. This is worth picking up. There's also a nice compact 2-page spread on town services, so if your party gets to a tavern and they want to know how much that ale is, this is where you can flip to. I love inclusions of little things like this. I know you can find them in other OSR books. Basic Fantasies Equipment Emporium has a whole bunch of stuff on town services, for example. But it's nice to have it here, just in this little 2-page spread. It's almost in the center of the book, so you flip it open and, all right, here's the basic stuff. And from that point, if they ask for something that's not on that list, you at least have a baseline that you can use to adjust prices for different products. Really nice. There is a nice 2-page spread on hiring retainers and what the process is to do that. In old school gaming, having people to be people at arms or torchbearers or load carriers, this was part of the game. It's really not something that I've used a whole lot, but it's part of the old school fabric, and I'm glad that they actually put in the process into this little booklet here. Now, in addition to the process of hiring hirelings, say that 10 times fast, there is a nice 2-page spread on how you can do quick equipment for people. So if you have a class, it's going to tell you what armor you start with. It's going to tell you what weapons that you start with and what table you roll on to get them. So if you're going to be a bard, for example, your armor is going to be rolled on the armor table, 1d4, and ignore shields. And then you roll on the bard's weapons table, 1d4 twice. And that's your starting equipment for that character. This is not something that I would use for PCs unless someone dives in a dungeon and they just want to roll up something really quick and not have to think about it. But for NPCs, this is a way to give some flavor to the characters that you bring in without having to spend the time of, well, what armor would they be carrying? Are they going to kit out with this? Nope. Roll the dice. That's what they got. And you can create NPCs with a lot of flavor without having to worry about thinking up everything on your own. It's all random. You can stock your town with a whole bunch of NPCs who have random equipment all of a sudden, and it just makes the place feel more alive. The last 2 features in issue 2 of Carcass Crawler are an item-based encumbrance system that is a lot simpler to adjudicate than the weight-based, based on how many coins worth of weight you are carrying. That is in the traditional setting. And it's really simple and stealth. It works very fast. It reminds me a lot of the item-based encumbrance system that exists in Castles and Crusades, although it is a little more streamlined. I actually think Castles and Crusades might nail it a little bit better, but this is actually very well done. And if you want to not have to worry about how much weight people are carrying, this is a very simple system. And then there is the old classic for old school gaming, traps. It gives advice on how and when to set traps up, how you work them into the dungeon and create tension that way, and also how you narratively play them out. It's not so much you just say, and you fall into a pit. It's, the ground shifts and you begin to slide forward, looking down into the gaping maw that is suddenly opened up beneath you. See, that's kind of really where you want to go. Traps are supposed to create tension and make people feel like they are in a dangerous spot inside this dungeon. In the United States, you can pick up the 2nd issue of Carcass Crawler from the Exalted Funeral website for $10 plus shipping. That comes with both the PDF and the print book. And you can get it over at DriveThruRPG as a PDF only for $7.50. It is well worth the pickup if you play Old School Essentials or if you play any OSR game where you're just looking to add a little more color into the game. Fantastic new races, really cool use of energy weapons, and a mini module you can run people through if you're feeling particularly mean. Great times, and I highly recommend picking it up. Now, for me, I am really excited because this month I am starting up my first in-person campaign ever. We're just going to play once a month. I still have 2 weekly online games that I'm playing in. I think if I tried to do another weekly table, I would get kicked out of the house, and rightly so. But I'm really excited to do this, and the system that I'm using is a new one. I'm going to be playing Castles and Crusades, and that's the review that I'm going to be doing next week. So, until then, happy playing, everyone.